You're listening to Communicate with Zen and John from Empower Your English.
We would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners and custodians of the land on which we meet today at Monash University, Melbourne, Victoria, Oceania, the land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. Hi everybody, I'm Zen, and with me is my co-host John.
Hi all. It's great to be back, Zen. And you're listening to, of course, Empower Your English as per our great voiceover. Communicate. Now, it's a program that's been going, this is our fifth week, doesn't matter. It's really good. We love doing it. It's all about different types of communication. We've got some great guest speakers in the studio at the moment. We'll introduce soon. I just thought I'd tell everybody that we do have a website. It is www.eyenow.melbourne. So feel free to shoot us an email. We'd love to get some feedback on what your thought of the show, and perhaps you might even like to be interested in future shows. We do live stream across the world, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on a Thursday, and we love doing it, and we love the experience talking to some really fascinating people on the topic of empowered communication and strategies. I think I've said it all, Zen, have I?
Yes, you do, John. Thank you so much for that. In this studio with us tonight, we have two guests in the studio. Professor Peter Oakes. Peter is a clinical psychologist and independent researcher who has worked alongside people with disabilities and their supporters for more than 30 years. He is in Oceania to support a project which aims to help people to communicate about things that are not okay. Peter's work as a psychologist and believes strongly in different communication styles, such as people telling stories involving their lives and the relationships. And we also have Tom Fakenitz in the studio as well. Tom is a copywriter and journalist and has been working professionally since 2011. He runs a business called I Sell Words. Tom is a member of the Oceanian General Semantics Society, which is dedicated to analyzing the role of communication, words, and behavior. Tom's mission is to rid the world of bad writing, one sentence at a time.
I can feel thousands of people saying, yes, please do, Tom. Please do it. Before we get stuck into the questions, I just want to start with you, Peter. Things that are not okay. Let's talk about that a bit more when we talk about people with disabilities. What's not okay?
Well, it's not really okay when people with disabilities live quite often in fear of being hurt or treated in undignified and cruel ways. And so we've had lots of experiences of people in residential support services and other settings where particularly vulnerable people have been abused. And we're trying to find out ways that we can help people stay safe, help people speak up for themselves, and also help other people to spot the signs and stop it before it starts.
Fantastic, great work. And Tom, I Sell Words. What's your most expensive word?
Probably triple letter score or triple word score if you get it across. Probably the most expensive. I don't usually charge by the word because I write them too quick, and it's not a good business model.
It's a good name.
Oh, thank you.
What's it all about?
Well, I sell words because my words sell. It's about communication, I guess, for businesses mostly. Obviously, work with yourself and Zen as well. But mostly businesses trying to get their point across and in a clear and efficient and engaging manner. That's pretty much the point of I Sell Words.
This makes sense. Let's kick off.
Wow, I think like both, no matter the words or the viewpoint from Peter's is including empowerment in it.
True.
So I think maybe we can talk more about empowerment.
Let's go.
So I'm thinking about the communications, like, in the daily life, no matter at work or having interaction with others. What does the word empowerment means to you?
Well, shall I make a start on that? And yeah, I've been thinking about that because we talk about words, and for me, sometimes empowerment can be quite a difficult word. I've heard people say that I'm going to empower you, which is immediately a kind of power move. So in communication, for me, empowerment is about us all taking responsibility to make it possible for all of us to communicate. And that then can also help us build the sort of confidence that we need to speak up and speak out and to say what's on our mind. So it is about power, but it's also about making a place where people can talk and be themselves however they wish to communicate.
I think the key word I picked up from that, Peter, was power balance.
Yeah.
Keeping it level.
Yeah.
And I think as soon as that balance changes, that's when people sort of feel very unsafe sometimes and don't know what to do and panic and all different sorts of reactions.
Yeah. And I've seen people look really scared when someone's come in and said, I'm going to empower you. And that's a kind of quite scary thing to say to somebody. Whereas if you just by the way that you are and the way that you're with people, that the empowerment then comes about as a natural process by us all taking responsibility for it, I think.
You start looking for the PowerPoint. How do I turn the power switch off?
Yes, exactly. Where's the switch?
That's right.
Yeah.
What do you think, Tom?
Empowerment, to me, I think is sort of getting the stuff that's in your brain out there for other people to understand it. I think empowerment, like there's a lot of communication out there which is not quite clear, and I think that's disempowering to a lot of people. Like they want to get their point across, but it doesn't come across quite as well as they would like. And this could be a range of factors. But I think empowerment is when you actually scoop out the insides of your brain and put it out there on a page or on the radio or whatever it is, and other people understand it as much as closely as what sort of was in your mind to begin with. I think that's sort of the power of words, if we're going to use that term, empowerment.
Sure.
Your work is really crucial to that, John, isn't it? Because what's happening is that information is a key way that we exchange power in this world. And you're making information more accessible. All of us are trying to work to make information more accessible to more people, which is a way of spreading power. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the power dynamic is, how do I say this? I've lost my train of thought.
Would you like to buy some words off me?
Yeah, I'll put in for a loan.
I've got some bargain ones here.
Yep, 3-letter ones going cheap.
Please.
Yeah, cool. But yeah, like you were saying before, information is sort of, it's not what you sell anymore. It's what you say, because people are going to search for your website and they're going to look at what you're doing. And I guess the power of words, there's this old, I think it was a comic like Calvin and Hobbes or something like that, where I think Calvin says, the power of words can make you think about a big red dinosaur. And I wield this power with, and I choose to use it whenever I want. So now we're all thinking of a big red dinosaur.
I like it.
Yeah, so I choose to use this power. You try to use it wisely, but you can use it for nefarious purposes too. Obviously, there's the epidemic of fake news and all that kind of stuff, where I guess there's an added layer of, how do you want to say?
Was that a word or a verb?
Verb is a verb is a word.
There was a cough, actually.
Yeah, it was definitely a cough, not a word at all. That one's free. But so words can hurt and they can heal and they can do whatever you sort of want them to. And right now there's so much information and there's so many words and there's a general semanticist and a writer called Samuel Hayakawa, and he said we live in a Niagara of words where we're just torrents of words coming at us all the time, and we in the old days we trusted the news people to filter that out, and now we're just inundated with tweets and Facebook messages, and it's hard to know what's real, what's not, what's sort of hyperbole, what isn't. So it's getting harder and harder because there's just so much. And as we were talking about empowerment, it kind of disempowers people when there's so much out there and there's no tools for some people to sort of think, okay, what's useful, what's not useful. Yeah.
And we're talking, of course, English right now. We're talking about words. But I guess, Zen, can I throw to you, is that an issue for different cultures also? When we talk about words and how you use them?
I think so, because like personally, I believe that no matter in which language, the words itself actually attached with the power or emotion. So I do think that the words that we use can disempower people, but also can empower people as well, because it really depends on how we deliver the message, but also it depends on how does the receivers perceive that the message as well. So I think it's like a two-way communication.
For sure.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah, so so about the two-way communication, actually I think body language is also a two-way communication. So how do we, or how does Peter or Tom use it, and why does it work in some cases?
Yeah, it's absolutely central to the work of any psychologist, certainly, in that it's well over 50% of the message. And the key part of psychologists' work is to make positive relationships with people. And being more specific, what we're actually trying to do is to create a space between people that is safe. And in that space, people can talk about what is going on for them. People can bring their stories and their difficulties and their troubles, and they know that it's safe. And you can't create that space without having a kind of body language which is open and accepting and interested, because people pick it up straight away. I've had many people with disabilities, but also other people that have used psychology services who said, I know the minute I see a psychologist that doesn't care just by looking at them. And if the psychologist doesn't care about me, then I'm not going to tell them the most personal things that happen to me and that I need help with. So body language is actually crucial to that. Yeah, no doubt about it.
That's fascinating, yeah. You know, I guess I have the same thing when I go and see a doctor that's never seen me before. So I rock up to the clinic and I'm in a wheelchair, and it really gets back to, if they've got a good look, I'll tell them what the problem is. If they just panic and shake their head, yeah. I just want a script that I'm going, please.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Yeah. And I was talking to a bunch of kids not long ago, and they were talking about their teachers, because part of my role is to teach psychologists to be psychologists. And they were talking about their teachers, and they think, well, why do some people come in to do teaching when they clearly don't like kids? Which I always think is quite an interesting thing to say. But the way they know that is not by what the teacher says. The teacher would never say that. It's always something, it's about their body language. That's what it is.
Mm. I guess in my work, a lot of it is just text on a page, and it's a bit hard to sort of factor in body language. But obviously, I do a lot of networking, business networking, and yeah, you can, or I can really tell who doesn't want to be there and who's not quite right, just by the body language. And another thing, I had a client, and he was saying, look, my sales pitch is great when I'm in person, but it doesn't work on my webpage. Why is that? And, it is the body language. It could be how he's saying it, tone of voice, and, how they come across, what they're wearing, all this other kind of communication that's happening, I guess, subliminally, that I think we as human beings pick up on a lot more than what you're saying. I'm not sure of the actual percentages, but what the choice of words is not as significant as what you're wearing and your body language and tone of voice and things like that. So it's kind of the difference between selling it and not, and it could be just your body language. You could be having a scowl on your face instead of a smile, or you're hunched over or not. There's so many things that can affect your communication as a whole. And I think a lot of people, when they think about communication, they think, oh, it's what I've said or what I've written down. But, there's that quote by the Paul Watzlawick, and he calls that you can't not communicate. So even when you're not saying anything, that's still communication. It's like impossible to sort of not communicate. Like, say you're in some kind of situation where you're at work or something like that, and you sort of sullen and you're not participating, and that's communicating that you don't really care. It's a bit of a
That means a lot to me, just as a working as an advocate. You know, there's so many times you'll have health officials say he or she doesn't communicate, and we all go, okay then. Well, Felix say, hello. Yeah, good point. Interesting, isn't it? We all communicate.
Top quote.
Good name for a radio show. We got it.
That's a good one.
Another part of our work actually sometimes is teaching people some of those things, because some people grow up in environments or have stuff going on in their heads, which means they haven't ever learnt that kind of non-verbal communication. And that is a real impediment to people, and we need to find ways of teaching it sometimes too.
Yeah, I feel like the body language, no matter in which environment, this is very important. Yeah, in the studio, we also have the body language as well. We go to commercial right now.
You're listening to Communicate with Zen and John from Empower Your English.
Okay, well, welcome back. We are Communicate radio program. We have two guests in the studio with us. Peter is a clinical psychologist and independent researcher who has worked alongside people with disabilities and their supporters for more than 30 years. He is in Australia to support a project which aims to help people to communicate about things that are not okay. And Tom is a copywriter and journalist and has been working professionally since 2011. He runs a business called I Sell Words.
Tom, is there a difference between a journalist and a copywriter?
Yeah, a journalist tells the truth and a copywriter sort of makes it up.
All those journalists are listening to this, by the way.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, because I've had some questions when I've spoken about you coming on the program, and then people have said to me, what's a copywriter? So I think we're all going to feel for what a journo does, but copywriter.
Copywriter is probably, it's all sort of part of this big umbrella of professional writing and communication. A journalist obviously goes out into the field and reports on things, whereas a copywriter can do advertising copy or, you know, press releases or virtually anything. You know, the little, when you see an ad on Facebook or something, the little text underneath, that's copywriting. It's basically, in this day and age, digital copywriting is basically content for websites and social media and things like that.
Interesting. Always learning.
In the studio we have two successful expert in the studios. So now looking at your own success, Peter and Tom, can you share with us a particular situation or time where you felt your communication methods was effective, and what was an indicator for you?
Yeah, shall I kick off on that?
Yeah,
okay, yeah. I was thinking actually about training time, okay? So say part of my work is to train psychologists to be psychologists. And in the great city of Hull in the UK, where I was working at the university there, I had a trainee called Louise. And Louise was very, very anxious about learning, and she was very, very anxious about writing a thesis, this kind of big, long piece of work that people have to do in their training. And Louise used to come to me with like kind of at least 50 questions before every single session that we had, and was just overwhelmed with anxiety to the point that she wasn't able to work and wasn't able to complete the work. So the way that we had to communicate was in a way that actually was very containing of her anxiety. And I know it doesn't work well on radio, but my hands are actually out to one side, and there is in a kind of containing shape. And it was really important to put some boundaries around her anxiety, to contain that anxiety, and to enable her to find her ability to learn again. And that's what she did, really, almost entirely by kind of non-verbal behaviour, funnily enough, for coming up this morning, but also by saying to her, no, we need to move on from this. Let's talk about why you're so anxious and so And the feedback was good, and then eventually she did her thesis, and she's now working as an absolutely fantastic psychologist up in Yorkshire. Yeah, so all good.
That's a good example.
A particular time communication method was effective. I think talking to people when in business and whatever they're doing is the most effective method of sort of gaining knowledge, because everyone, I think, and maybe you could back this up, Peter, likes talking about themselves. And early on in my career, I was sort of asking people to write down what their business was like and all that kind of stuff, and it wasn't really working because it's like they hired me to write about them. Why am I getting them to do some of the work? And I sort of adapted my journalism training. It's like, talk to them, ask questions, get as much information as possible, lead them down into a safe sort of, I guess, container so they can actually talk freely. Because, I'm just some guy that they've paid to write stuff. They don't really know me from a bar of soap, so to speak. And sort of make it feel like, a lot of these businesses, like, they don't like talking themselves up. Says, yeah, we do okay. I guess we're pretty good. And when, the aim of the game is to say we're the best, hire us, buy our products, etc., etc. So talking and hopefully face-to-face is really good. But usually on the phone or Skype or something like that is probably the best method for me, where I've sort of incorporated into my process, and it's been really successful for me.
How do you know it's worked? When you reflect, you look back to sort of say, this worked because of?
I think it worked because just getting people to talk. Like, there's a book that I read called If You Can Talk, You Can Write by Joel Saltzman, which is a really great book. And by talking to people, like, there's the method of they just talk and talk and talk until you get to the gold nugget at the end. Because I think that's the natural inclination of how people sort of, I guess, talk to themselves in a way. Like you sort of work through something and then you get to the end and there's the answer, sort of thing. So yeah, there's a lot of, hot air, so to speak, but at the end of the day, what I'm getting at is that gold. So if I have to sit there for 15 minutes before they say something relevant, I think that's a successful outcome.
Just as you said that, I was thinking myself when I do computer work, I use voice-activated software called Drag and Dictate. So when you talk, you write, but I've had lots of conversations with you've got a thought in your mind, it goes through your mind down to your arms onto the keyboard. But when I'm doing my blogs or whatever, it's coming straight onto words on the paper. So it is a bit different. Talk and write. It's sort of there's no barrier when your voice is putting words on paper versus going through your hands. Do you ever use voice activated software at all, Tom, with your writing?
No.
Would you struggle?
I would. I would a bit. I probably write faster than I talk.
Sure.
But obviously there's a lot of people use that Drag and Dictate software and different variations on that. But at the end of the day, it's getting the words onto the paper and edit later. Like, talking is talking, and then writing you can edit. So I'm doing little keyboard things
with your fingers.
With my fingers, yeah.
I saw a bit of piano actually.
Oh, piano. Okay. But the principle is the same. I think a lot of people, when they get in front of a computer, they say, they have this paralysis. What word am I going to put on the page next? Whereas talking, I don't think there is that inhibition as much. It's like we just talk and then it's out there and there you go. But if you're on a computer, it's sort of looking at you and you can edit straight away, and there's this temptation to go back and fix this word and it's your second word on the page, sort of thing. But I think if you can approach writing in the same as talking, where the first draft is uneditable, it's out there, well, like it's done. I think it eliminates a lot of that inhibition.
For sure.
Wow, that's fascinating. Well, for people who are considering working in the areas that you both do, like maybe psychology or perhaps in copywriting, is there a golden rule you can share with them?
I mean, I was fascinated by what Tom was just saying, and how some of the close similarities between our work, and that you're having those conversations with business leaders or businessmen, and so am I, and finding ways to bring the essence of the person out. And thinking about the most important thing to say to anyone wanting to be a psychologist or to practice psychology is relationship. It's relationship. That is the essence of change. That's the essence of bringing the best out of people, enabling people to leave behind or at least accommodate some of the distress and difficulty that they have faced in their lives. And so the core to all clinical psychology is making positive, helpful relationships where people can then use that relationship to find a different way for them in the future. So yeah, relationship, I would always say. Yeah.
Can I challenge that in a way that
Go.
relationship is, it sounds a very natural word for what you're talking. You've got to put that in a box, of course, don't you? You've got to frame that up.
Yeah.
So this is where, it's just interesting that we have relationships. We've all got relationships with family, dogs, animals, art, music. We have relationships with all that. But you're talking about, but here's your boundary.
Yeah.
So,
and the skill of a psychologist is not so much to have the technical model, a thing that you do. It's the skill of the psychologist is to be able to construct and monitor and develop those positive therapeutic relationships. And that is right, and boundaries are very much part of that, and knowing how to create those and knowing how to make that relationship safe for somebody to be able to talk and to develop themselves within. But that's the core skill. It's the building of that relationship and also knowing where it's going and what's happening in that relationship. And then you can bring any technique into that. And all the evidence is that the technique for change is nowhere near as relevant as the quality of the therapeutic relationship.
I think there's a bit of similarity, like we were talking about, Peter. It is about relationships for sure, and in my sort of line of work, it's more of, I think the golden rule is sort of put your ego at the door, because I'm here, or a copywriter is there to tell someone else's story in their own voice almost, and keep it consistent. Like if you going into copywriting or journalism or any kind of writing, and to get your name in lights, don't is my advice. But I think you have to sort of be a sort of container for that story or that tone of voice or that kind of thing. And I wouldn't say, because obviously in psychology there's a therapeutic element, but it's still narrative. It's still a story. So you're listening to someone's story, and I guess in your line of work, Peter, there's that, you say, how can we affect change, or how can we look at this a different way? Where I guess in my line of work, it's sort of getting that narrative and sort of explaining it better or making it engaging or that kind of thing. So I guess the golden rule is, sort of take yourself out of it and be that conduit for that story, and not to write too many unnecessary words.
is it fair to say that you've both got to look at your audience before you even start communicating?
Yeah, very much so.
That's part of it, isn't it?
Yeah, you start with them and with that person. Yeah, you don't start with it's all about me.
Yeah, but to know your audience before you even open the door.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And the other thing I think we share is the kind of, certainly for me, the thing that underpins all of it is strong and sound ethics. Okay, so that is where you only do good where you respect the autonomy of the person that you're talking with, and that you maintain safety and all those sorts of things. And there's a strong ethical element to writing and communicating in that way as well, I'm sure.
A lot of things that I won't do, and I guess this is sort of related, is I get school kids coming to me and say, can you write my essay for me? And I'm like, no, absolutely not. And they get a bit upset, but it's basic honesty. And even in copywriting, obviously there's hyperbole and persuasion and all that kind of stuff, but at the end of the day, your thing or your service or your product has to do what it says it does, otherwise there's no trust.
Yeah, trust and relationship, and also know about our let's say, audience or the one who communicate with. That's so important. Yeah. Okay. Commercial again.
You're listening to Communicate with Zen and John from Empower Your English.
Okay, welcome back again. We have Peter and Tom in our studio. Peter is a clinical psychologist and independent researcher who has worked alongside people with disabilities and their supporters for more than 30 years. He is in Australia to support a project which aims to help people to communicate about things that are not okay. And Tom is a copywriter and journalist and has been working professionally since 2011. He runs a business called I Sell Words. Okay, so before we were talking about relationship. So I think we in our work or in our daily life, we have a type of the mentoring. I think mentoring is also based on relationship to build up the conversation or communication. So what are your thoughts on the word mentoring? And have you had a mentor that has helped you before?
Yeah, it's really interesting, this idea of mentoring. I've had over the years a couple of mentors that have been imposed upon me by people, and that has never ever worked. And
How did that come about?
That came about because the organisation I was working for decided I needed to be achieving certain things, and to do that I needed a mentor who had already achieved those sort of things. And of course, when I was with that person, I just felt like I was complete rubbish because they'd achieved these things and I was nowhere near. So, and we didn't have any kind of relationship, and it was imposed on that person as well, I think. The mentors that have really meant a lot to me are people where either we've kind of found each other, so we've been around working in different settings, and that person is one person I'm particularly thinking of who is senior to me, and who I shared a sense of value and I shared a positive relationship with, and I genuinely wanted to understand just how that person was able to kind of do the things that they do and maintain their values and that kind of stuff. And that developed into it's still going on actually. He's well into his 70s now, and I still look to him as a guide, which is the idea of mentoring, I think, is as a guide.
Oh, it's got to be natural.
Yeah, it has to be natural.
Has to be natural, yeah. Organic
right.
almost. It really does.
As for me, the copywriting mentor, I couldn't really say I had one. I sort of got into it sort of independently, I guess. I was doing a website rewrite for an old place I was working, and they thrust all this huge project on me, and I was in the doldrums typing out stuff, and so I could probably do this on my own and make a bit more money out of it, and probably not. And I sort of had a field of dreams, build it and they will come approach, but along the way, I've had people come in from journalism and I guess writing in general, and business as well. And yeah, it was totally natural. Like now looking back on it, it says, oh yeah, this guy's definitely been a mentor to me, and X, Y, and Z have been. But I've never really consciously said, hey, you're my mentor. They probably balk and say, no, I'm not. But yeah, it definitely has to be natural and almost not even conscious, almost. Like one mentor that I'm thinking of is he always sort of calls me up and said, like, I've sent out some email and says, do you know what you how you could have made that better? And I've sort of listened and taken on board, and because he's been around the block and I haven't, so yeah.
Yeah, I think there's so many sort of informal mentoring. We're giving it a name right now, but how many people look at you, Tom, and look at you, Peter, and listening to every word you say or what you're doing? And guess what? You guys are big mentors right now. We just forget to think about that. And also our natural family, that's a type of mentoring. Our mum or dad, our brother, sister, uncle, auntie. Let's not get bogged down too much on giving that a name, but I know when Zen and I have done different workshops around employment, there are so many levels of mentoring that are informal, and if that mentor has gone or is not connecting with you anymore, you notice it.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Yeah, I looked it up. You know, there are like more than 50 definitions of mentor.
Is
So
there?
yeah. So yeah, that kind of speaks to what you're saying there, really, John. Absolutely. But it's also pretty universal across cultures. There is this idea of if in all cultures throughout history, there's been this idea of people being guided by others.
It's a
Yeah.
big part of the hero's journey, I think.
Yeah.
The threshold guardian taking you through, and then obviously to get the wisdom you have to do it yourself, but to put yourself in the position to get that wisdom, you probably need some kind of guide. That's just life, from tying your shoelaces up to running a Fortune 500 company. I guess it's sort of the same thing.
I guess there's also a risk of hesitating to say my mentor is actually a person who's 20 years younger than me. Can they be? Yes, they can.
Okay.
Right, I've got nieces and nephews that I look to and I sort of just learn and learn and learn. Guess what? I want to call it mentoring. They can be younger. They can be inexperienced. I think I wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning and reflect and say, I am thinking this because of what was said to me and I'm going to follow up. So I'm going to call it mentoring.
Yeah. Fascinating.
It is.
Yeah, I think the mentoring is not just depends on the age, gender, or nationality. It's much more based on the relationship between two people and how do they communicate. But also, I think, John, actually, I would say that actually for the mentoring, once the people who be your mentor, actually the wisdom is already within yourself because that knowledge is already in ourselves. It depends on how we use it in the good at the right timing.
Interesting, yeah. So it's a bit like there's a seed in the dirt and someone's come along, put water on it and it's grown. Is that what you're saying? Interesting. You're always challenging me, Zen. Don't stop.
But thank you. You're my mentor.
No, don't stop it. You're my mentor. Okay, enough. Move on. Next question. Please, this is going to get really sloppy.
Wow, yeah. So, like part of the mentoring, actually, I think we also communicate with different stakeholders as well, like maybe our clients, our family members, our friends, or even though someone else. So, what works well when communicating with different type of the stakeholders?
You go kick off, Tom. Have a go at this one.
I think it's just a matter of being as clear as possible. When Warren Buffett, the big investor, Berkshire Hathaway, one of the best pieces of advice he's probably had was, whenever I'm doing my annual report, I think about my sister and I write it as if she's going to read it. And I think that's you'd never know, like there's so many stakeholders out there for various different things, and I tell my writers or clients or whatever, just make it as simple as possible. Don't put hurdles in the way of your communication. If there's a word that you barely understand, no one else is going to understand it. This obviously works when it's sort of like formal communication, like memos and web pages and things like that. Obviously, fiction, you can do whatever you want, but when you're communicating to stakeholders, everyone should have no ambiguity in what's being said. I think, like if you're going to put your case forward to a bunch of lawyers, or it's people who are maybe disadvantaged, talk to them in the same clear, concise way, I think.
Yeah, too right. I was really impressed by somebody who actually worked in a kind of serious job doing negotiating around the world between people that are in conflict. And I know the rest of the world at the moment is obsessed with coffee, but this person was obsessed with the idea of a cup of tea. Okay.
So it's not Donald Trump, okay. He hates tea. I was wondering if it was him, but he's not a tea drinker. Go on.
Yeah, and the way that this person used to work was always, he'd just say, we need a cup of tea.
Yep.
Let's sit and have a cup of tea. And to go around stakeholders and just spend time having a cup of tea is a way of kind of building the relationships that you're talking about, Zen, I think. And it's also a way of kind of, it's an equalising thing. You're just having a cup of tea. And that was the way people were feeling comfortable enough to solve some really important conflicts and to avoid violence and release hostages and stuff like that. So this guy would disappear off to all sorts of corners of the world every now and then, and we'd say, Simon, what are you going to do? He says, just going to have a few cups of tea.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because even in Australian culture, and I guess across the world, but let's catch up for coffee.
Yeah.
We're always saying catch up for coffee. Why do we say, I would like to see, because I don't need another coffee,
Yes.
I need to talk with you. But you've got to have that coffee. It's it's interesting. And I said, and sometimes I'm actually a chocolate drinker. Okay, can we catch up for a coffee, for a chocolate? Have a chai. No, not catch up for chai. I'll catch up for chocolate. But it is, we've got to use that leveller to say, and I love different types of, I've had a few meetings where people say, I would like to meet with you. Let's go for a walk. And that's really cool. So forget about the, depending on the Melbourne weather, of course, but forget about going to a cafe. Let's go for a walk and talk.
Yeah.
And they say, get some really good conversations going there too, because in the right space, in the right garden, you've got the flow of communication going, no distractions, and it's a really good chat.
Yeah.
But that's an interesting point, John. The medium is the message, as Marshall McLuhan used to say, and different settings can actually sort of put people in different frames of mind. If you're talking on a golf course, it seems to be like a business-oriented thing, where the coffee thing is, especially in the dating world, they asked me for coffee, what does that mean? What's going on? It's like, they asked me out for a drink, what does that mean? What's going on? So the venue for communication is also another factor that comes into it, communication as well. So that's quite interesting.
It is, because it sets a scene, because you've also got communication happening where who's watching you communicate, and that affects how you're going to communicate, because you've got all these eyes and ears listening. So this is where the walk is really good.
Yeah. So actually, I have a questions for Peter. I also studied the psychologist before. Then this psychology mostly is like the clinical setting as an environment to communicate with the clients. So how can we make our client feel like more comfortable to talk and share about their feelings or share about their concerns and something like that?
Yeah, it's very interesting. One of the things that I do a lot in practice is actually try to get out of the therapeutic room. The idea that you sit face to face with another individual. It's such a weird thing to do. We don't do it in any other setting except that. And actually that can put people off their strides. Some people are very distressed or very uncontained, if you know what I mean, and therefore need that kind of containment of 4 simple walls and 2 chairs and all that kind of stuff, and that works well. But a lot of my work, especially around people with disabilities, is we will make a drink together, or we will go for a walk together, or we will do something else. A lot of work with young people who have psychosis beginning to develop and all that kind of stuff. A lot of that work takes place in cafes. Because that's a place where people can deal with stuff, and it doesn't feel just so weird. So a therapeutic space is dependent on the individual and getting that context right and reading that, and not just saying, I'll be the one who defines therapeutic spaces. If you start with that, then immediately you're disempowering the person.
Yeah, so the environment really play a very important role.
Yeah.
And that links into like music therapy, art therapy, doesn't it?
Yeah.
What are you doing with your hands at the time? It's sort of what's going on. It's sometimes and I know with the work when I do work as an advocate with people with an intellectual disability, it is all about flicking through books or looking at a garden. But we'll still communicate, but there's that nice distraction going on too, which doesn't make it too direct. What are you playing with?
I'm sitting here with the top of a bottle of water.
Okay.
And I've run my fingers around it at least 50,000 times since the beginning of this thing.
And for those people who know me, I've always got these wooden beads around my wrist
You've
too.
got your beads. Yeah,
That's right.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
You play with your
Yeah, I
hair.
play with my hair.
And Tom?
I forgot my fidget cube at home.
He's very still over there, actually.
Yeah,
I'm
it's-
impressed by him.
I'm surprised myself, actually.
Yeah. But it is interesting, isn't it, to have that distraction. You're still constantly, what we don't want is that bloody mobile phone.
Yes.
That's too much of a distraction.
Yeah.
Very true.
You're listening to Communicate with Zen and John from Empower Your English.
Oh, wow, welcome back. We have Peter and Tom in the studio with us in the Communicate radio program. Peter is a clinical psychologist and independent researcher who has worked alongside with people with disabilities and their supporters for more than 30 years. He is in Australia to support a project which aims to help people to communicate about things that are not okay. And Tom is a copywriter and journalist and has been working professionally since 2011. He runs a business called I Sell Words. We had such a deep conversation, a very meaningful conversation about the environment and then building relationship with different people. I think listening will play a very important role during the communication. So, like in the work you are doing, how important is the listening, and do you ever reflect on are you doing it well on listening?
Are you listening, both of you? They've turned off. They're not even listening. I can't believe
Sorry,
this.
didn't catch that.
What was that?
Unbelievable. This is a live show, guys. We've rehearsed this. All right.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Do we have to? Are you listening now?
I've got it.
Got
it. It's clearly absolutely crucial to the work that I do. And I think I want to, when thinking about this, there's a kind of difference between surface listening and really listening. So the surface listening, where you're taking in the message, you're listening to the words that somebody's saying, you're making sense of them, or you're listening to the signs that somebody's doing, or you're listening to a picture that somebody's drawing if they're not able to speak, and all those sorts of things. So you're listening surface to the content of that. But then there's a kind of deep listening, which is listening to the kind of the story and the emotion and the kind of essence of what this person is actually saying to you. And that takes the real concentration. So if I'm not doing this well, and this happens on occasions, I find myself just listening to the surface, the kind of top content of what's going on. I'm not that tired at the end of a session. I'm not that tired at the end. If I've been really focusing and really trying to listen at a deep level to what this person is communicating with me, it's totally exhausting, and you come out of a session completely wrung out, because that does take a lot from you to listen in that deep way. And I'm hoping that we are developing a world where we're all listening in a much deeper way, rather than just listening to surface and then saying our surface. Yeah.
What about if you suspect you're not being listened to it? Do you throw in a little line just to check, are you listening to me? Is there any tricks that you use? I know I've got my own thoughts about it, but because you get the head nods, people go, yep, got it. You look at their eyes, yeah, got it. But you said all you're doing is nodding. You can't hear a word I'm saying.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what about? Have you thought about that, Peter? As far as how do you, as you're talking, how are you checking the listening?
Yeah, you have to be very careful with that, because you are watching to the extent to which somebody is listening to what you're saying as well, and you can see people glaze over. But certainly in my line of work, that's my responsibility. So in some ways, it's trying to get to a point where you can actually openly challenge that. And you can say, look, I've noticed that we're talking, but we're not getting very far. And how can I communicate with you in a way which enables you to really connect to what I'm saying? because that, certainly in my sort of role, that's my challenge, rather than the person bringing it to me. But then at some points you do eventually sometimes have to say, look, we're not at this point in a place where we can do this work together, and often that's a source of relief to somebody. There's the light bulb joke, how many psychologists does it take to change a light bulb? And it's only one, but the light bulb's got to want to change.
Exactly. Yeah. Now it's about throwing those little spikes in to sort of say, as you're talking and saying, and what's your view on that? Would you have done differently? And you can say, oh, one moment.
Yeah.
What's your experience, Tom, with listening?
Listening, I think it's crucial to what I do, especially in business where there are a lot of business people, I guess, blowing a lot of hot air everywhere. I like to listen more. I think in my line of work, you have to listen more than you can, you have to receive more than you transmit, I guess you could say. As for sort of throwing curveballs, I remember when I was a kid, I knew my parents weren't listening. It says, "Oh, the house is on fire," and we just won the lotto, and no reaction. But I think now as adults, I think to take it to a higher consciousness, sort of like what you were saying before, Peter. It's is this working for you, or how do you think this is going, or just to sort of bring people back into the room, I guess, to say, okay, is this working? Are you getting anything out of this? And it also works, I think, for assertive communication. If someone's sort of criticizing you and you feel like it's not a fair criticism, it's like, oh, was that meant to hurt, or what was the meaning behind that? And I think when I'm in that sort of flow of listening, I do say a lot, what do you mean by that? Because a lot of communication can be ambiguous, where they might mean something, what I think they mean is completely different to what they think they mean. So, a lot of what do you mean by that is probably when I'm doing my deep listening, like what Peter said. I think it's just the higher consciousness sort of thing to bring people back. Like there is a sort of trance-like state where people can be like, I don't know if you've ever been to a really boring lecture and you've just nodded off, but I've done that a lot. There is sort of like a trance state. I don't want. It's a bit exaggerated, but there is this sort of like you're sort of lost in this, and you could be engaged with it, or you could be falling asleep.
Yeah.
Did I see at one of my lectures doing that?
No, I would never.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Tom. The poor lecturer the students can be daydreaming during the lectures if that is not engaging.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, as Tom, you touched on assertiveness before. So actually, I know that some people would like to be a leader in particular field, maybe in social work or psychology, or even though copywriting or something like that. So, if however they are not confident to be assertive, do you have any advice or suggestion on it?
For me, assertiveness. I think it's a learned thing. It's a muscle someone develops. For kids, being assertive, I guess it would be a bit of a daunting thing because they're so powerless so much of the time, because they're dependent on adults to feed them, and if you anger them, where do you go, sort of thing. And especially if one doesn't feel confident with the English skills, like you guys with EYEI. Yeah. If someone isn't confident in what the choice of words they're saying, it probably doesn't come out as assertive as it could. But I think it just takes practice in a safe sort of environment where someone can, not in a clinical environment, but what you guys were doing with the workshops and things like that. So I think, it is a developed skill, like anything. Like I could develop my skill at maths, but no, not going to happen. I think assertiveness, it can be learned, and it can be how do you say, trained. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think you've got to be careful with people forcing things. And I must admit, it's very old now, but I'm a big fan of the I'm okay, you're okay kind of thing, and helping people reflect on, who's okay here. And if it's I'm not okay and you're okay, then we need to be thinking about that.
Sure.
So yeah, I think that's helpful. And in addition, maybe to learning the skills, the kind of where you, to some extent, are kind of almost acting as if you're assertive initially, which is a good way to start. There's something about building confidence as well, so that over time, assertiveness becomes natural, because I actually am confident in who I am and my right to be in this situation. And I think we can help each other develop that kind of confidence, where then assertiveness will just come naturally from that, because people will put themselves in a I'm okay, you're okay position. Yeah.
How do you gauge yourself to say, I've been successful? How do you sit back and say, okay, I've either made the person cry, or I've bought the car a bit cheaper, or I got the drink for free? What's an indicator to say, wow, because Tom, you're talking about you learn it, or you train it, you practice it. When do you finish being said and say, okay, got it, done it? What's an indicator, Peter?
Yeah, still looking for that one, John. I'm not sure I ever wanted to be at that place where I always thought, because I'm getting to the top end of my 50s, and I always thought that by now I would have this kind of sense of success and accomplishment and confidence, and I actually haven't, and I don't think I want that actually.
Yeah. No, it's not something. It's not a badge of honour, is it?
No,
I don't think you don't sort of say, guess what, I'm assertive.
Yeah.
It's not something you'd be proud of. It's a communication method used with caution, I would say.
Yeah, very much so. Never forced.
For sure.
Never forced. Yeah.
And I think it depends on the timing, when is the right timing to be assertive as well, I think. Yeah. So that we have such a beautiful conversation tonight. Really thank you, Tom and Peter, coming to Communicate Radio program tonight. Share a lot of different wisdom, knowledge on communication, and also body language, and also give us some advice as well.
That's right. And for our listeners, thank you for staying with us. Hope you've got something out of it. Don't forget, Empower Your English has Communicate Radio program. You're listening to it right now. We are going to be on every Thursday night, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Do not forget our website. That's eyenow.melbourne. We'd love to hear from you, and thanks for listening. Thanks, guys.
See you next
Thank you.
week. Thank you.
Thank you.